No problem. We're going to go ahead and call this Monday, June 19th meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for coming. We are meeting both in person as well as remotely. So welcome to those that aren't present here physically tonight as well. Let the record reflect that Steve Quinnell is excused this evening. I'll move on to our Pledge of Allegiance and would ask Lisa Jones to please lead us this evening. Thank you, Lisa. We'll move on to communications from the public. We do have 2 public hearings advertised for this evening, so if you're here to speak to one of those hearings, please wait until I call item 6 on the agenda. Otherwise, if you have anything to present to the council, now would be your opportunity, and just your name and address for the record, please, when you approach the podium. Nathan.
Nathan Dugan, 937 Kalispell Avenue, speaking as myself because I haven't talked to my board about this yet, but just want to follow up on the discussion that kind of happened in the work session there before this session, talking about short-term rentals. And I think that now is probably a good time to look at some solutions to address those issues, potential issues that you guys talked about and issues that we've been having. We're as far away from the next legislative session as we're going to get. There's probably going to be a bill to do something with short-term rentals again. And so the way I look at it, we should do something probably pretty fast and then have something in place for 2 years until it doesn't exist anymore. And that's kind of the game that we have to play, I think. If we wait for 1.5 years, then we have something for 6 months. It's not very effective. But I think something that we could potentially look at is doing for new short-term rental permits. So existing permits or whatever, they can renew those until they sell the house or whatever. But for new permits, establishing an owner occupancy requirement for short-term rentals. This effectively establishes a cap of full home rentals where that currently exists. Doesn't allow beyond that, and I think like you could choose how you want to define that, but something pretty difficult to meet, like a 9-month occupancy requirement rather than like a 7 or a 6, so that we're not seeing them just everything convert to a short-term rental in the summer. But I think that is something that we could probably look at, maintain the zones as they currently exist, keep the old ones as they are until the property sells, and require that to get a new permit, there's just an owner occupancy requirement, so it can't be a short-term rental all year long, basically. Yeah, that's kind of half-baked thoughts, but that's where I'm at on that. I think it's time to do something and have at least 2 years before it gets taken away.
Thanks, Nathan. Further public comment? Ed.
Council, Mayor, thanks for what you guys do. Just letting you know, I had a super genius idea. We're going to do a talk show podcast at the bar every Wednesday starting July 12th. I did talk to John about it. He'll be our first guest along with John Middleton, and Ryan Fried will be on the show. It'll be really fun. John's going to do the state of Whitefish. And after that, my goal is to everybody running for council will be a main guest on this show of 3 guests, community leaders, and then whoever's running for council will get a spot on that to expose them to the community and give them a way to reach out and ask questions, answer questions. We think that a lot of times the city council debates and these election seasons are kind of boring and not much participation. I think if we put a little beer and pizza involved, it might help a little bit. Might be a little more fun. And I want to invite you guys to. We would like to host the city council debate at the end of September as well. At the end of the run of this season of the show, we want to have the debate at the bar at the end of September too. So we're going to send invites out to everybody. And I think, was it today that it was it? We know who's running now, right? So 6 people. That's it, right? Okay. I mean, you know how it is, small town. You hear a lot of things. All right. Well, there will be more about it for sure. You guys will know, but July 12th is when it starts. And, one of these episodes we'd like to have everybody that's the sitting members, too, on council come on and be on a show, too, at some point. We'll email you guys out, and thanks a lot. Back to my writers' meeting.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate you hosting that this summer and fall. Further public comment? Not for the public hearings, just anything you'd like to discuss or bring to the attention of the council. Sure. Hey, Lisa.
I think that's a brilliant idea. He's already out of here, Ed. My name is Lisa Jones. I don't want to give my address for safety reasons. I live in Whitefish outside city limits in the 59937. My husband and I also own 3 properties in the city limits. I am grateful for all the time you volunteer in your roles, and I am thankful I live in a democracy where public comment is encouraged. I also want to show my appreciation tonight for all those that are running and willing to put their time into public office, the incumbents that are coming back, as well as those new folks that are throwing their throwing their whatever that that expression is. So happy Juneteenth, Independence Day, and happy Pride Month to you all. I hope you were able to read the book I gifted you and also consider my requests when I stood before you 1 year ago. In a short and sweet summary, they were 1, officially initiate a city committee including diverse citizens representing people of color, LGBTQ+, people of faith, and others that have been historically oppressed, with the role and vision of advising the council and staff on recommendations to expand the city's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And number 2, we actually revisited it when I did an online meeting a few months ago, so I think that's in progress. So I just wanted to check on that, and that was the request to consider making Juneteenth an official city holiday starting in 2023 to demonstrate your commitment and create more awareness on the focus of diversity, equity, and inclusion in Whitefish. And please let me know how I can voluntarily help any of these efforts. And I appreciate your consideration as always.
Thank you, Lisa. Further comments from the public tonight? Not seeing any volunteer board reports from the audience. How about online, Michelle? Any public comment either? Okay, great. Any volunteer board reports from the council this evening? Not seeing any, we'll move on to our consent agenda. You have the special meeting minutes as well as the regular meeting minutes in your packet. Any changes or additions? Rebecca.
Yep, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the consent agenda with 1 correction.
Is there a second to the motion?
Sure, second.
Thank you.
Okay, and the correction is on page 98. Thank you for adding the language back in, Michelle. And it's under the 3rd paragraph, 17th line down, and it reads PADDED, and it should read PASSED. So the line would read, that was the intent when we passed it. Thank you.
Further comments on the consent agenda as corrected? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us quickly to our first public hearing of the evening, which will be item 6A, ordinance number 23-10, an ordinance approving the Whitefish Community Corridor Residential Planned Unit Development to develop 146 units in 7 buildings on 6.56 acres at 105 Colorado Avenue, 709 Waverly Place, and 60, 124, 136, and 152 Texas Avenue in Whitefish, and this will be on a first reading. Wendy.
All right, good evening. So the applicant is proposing a residential PUD, an RPUD, to develop 146 apartments, which will be a mixture of 1- and 2-bedroom apartments in 7 buildings on 6.5 acres, located between Texas and Colorado, as displayed on the site plan up there. 30% of the apartments, or 44 units, will be deed restricted for permanent affordability. Access to the site is via private driveways on both the east and the west side, 1 off of Colorado and 2 off of Texas. Bicycle and pedestrian traffic will circulate through the project. There are sidewalks that connect all the way through, as well as through all the open space areas. The parking lot has 280 parking spaces. Both Colorado and Texas Avenue will have a building fronting on each street. The larger buildings are located near the center of the project. The building on Texas Avenue has 16 units and is 2 stories. The building on Colorado Avenue has 10 units, is 3 stories, and includes a community space for residents, including management offices and other common areas. The 5 central buildings are 3-story and have 24 units in each building. Throughout the site, there's open space areas, including green areas and areas around all the different buildings. There's a larger area along Waverly Place, which I think was originally probably going to be a road. It's about the proper dimension for that. There's a community space near the Colorado building, and then there's an open space kind of on the eastern portion of the project. The applicant is requesting 1 zoning deviation to park vehicles and have a parking lot within 5 feet of the property line, where the standard would require it meet the setbacks, which is 10 feet for the WR2 and 15 for the WR4. The benefit provided, they are providing, again, 30% affordable housing, 44 units. There'll be a mixture of 12 one-bedroom and 32 two-bedrooms, serving an area median income of 60 to 80% with an average of 70%. Those actual rents will be determined at the time of when the houses are actually built. As part of the volunteering to provide affordable housing, the applicant is entitled to some of our legacy home incentives, including additional height of up to 40 feet is what they're going for, reducing parking for the 2-bedroom or greater units, and then a 20% density bonus. So with the legacy home density bonus, they could have up to 167 units, and again, they're providing 146. Again, the property is located between Texas and Colorado. There are 5 parcels. There are 4 residential structures and some outbuildings that will be removed as part of the project. The property is surrounded by residential uses. It's served by all public services and facilities. We noticed adjacent landowners, advisory agencies, posted it to the city webpage, and also published legal in the paper. We had letters citing support for the project, and also folks concerned with loss of community character, locating the multifamily only on the western half of the project, loss of trees, concerns with outdoor lighting, high groundwater, traffic with both the local streets and the viaduct, loss of wildlife, increased noise, loss of privacy, increased density. We also received just today another letter of support that's probably in your packets. So we review PUDs according to the criteria in the zoning regulations. One is protecting environmentally sensitive areas. There's no streams, wetlands, or water bodies, but it is an area that's mapped as potentially having high groundwater. As such, they'll have to do high groundwater monitoring as part of their engineering plans that they'll submit. Under wildlife, the area has not been identified as crucial habitat, but it's likely bear and deer and other animals do migrate through the property like they do all throughout town. They will have to do bear-proof garbage cans. We did notify Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and we didn't get any comments from them. We will recommend a condition that they do a tree preservation plan. There are some nice trees on the property that potentially could be saved and integrated into landscaped areas. As far as open space, the PUD, as I'm sure you all know, requires 30% open space, but if you're providing affordable housing, you can reduce that down to 20%. They're providing 22% of the site in open space. Again, there's the 3 main areas that we've described already. Area 2 to the west of the Colorado Avenue is a little more than 5,000 square feet. The area off of Waverly Place is more than 8,000 square feet. And then the area sort of in the central between the buildings is more than 18,000 square feet. All areas are showing landscaping and paths and tot lots, which will require a condition of approval to see those final designs. Remaining open space areas are located throughout the site around buildings. The project layout is considering the neighborhood, because it is more single family to the east and more multifamily to the west, by locating the smaller buildings with a smaller scale and mass on the edges, and then putting the larger buildings in the center, and then locating open space kind of around all those areas. This area does have a number of multifamily projects. This one's bigger. It will definitely be one of the biggest ones in that neighborhood, but they are scattered throughout this particular neighborhood. They aren't developing any new public or private streets. As I described earlier, the project's going to use the parking lot as their kind of grid system, sort of a modified type grid system. There's an alley to the south that will remain unimproved. They aren't providing any access for their project using that alley. The project did do a TIS, which is included in your packet. At full build-out, the project will generate 65 a.m. peak hour trips and 79 p.m. peak hour trips. 2 of the intersections identified in that report have level of service C with or without, or less than C, with or without the project until improvements identified in the transportation plan are implemented. Project, mostly traffic will go south into downtown. And they also suggested a retiming of the intersection at Edgewood Place and Wisconsin Avenue to help with level of service. MDT also shared this concern about the signal at Edgewood and Wisconsin, and we've recommended a condition of approval that they work together. The city entered into a third-party agreement with another traffic engineer to have them review the traffic study because we knew that folks would be concerned about it, and they concurred with the findings in that report. They had some suggestions for edits, and they made all those changes. No frontage improvements are required on Colorado Avenue as it was reconstructed a number of years ago. Colorado Avenue was designed with a shared use path on the west side of the road, and a lot of the projects that have been on the east side of Colorado, we've asked them to improve the pedestrian connection so folks can more easily get over to that shared use path, and so that's a recommended condition of approval. No frontage improvements are required on Texas Avenue because it was very recently finished, and it has a path on the west side, on their side of the project, so they'll be able to connect in and connect to the larger shared use path system. The development will encourage transportation alternatives because they are providing these pedestrian connections. It's well suited to take advantage of all the trails and stuff that are in this neighborhood. It is an infill project with easy access to these facilities, and it's close to downtown and schools in the commercial area. There is just one type of housing being built. It's all multifamily apartments, but the buildings are all different. They don't all look exactly the same, but they have a common theme. Public Works has reviewed all the infrastructure, preliminary plans for water, sewer, stormwater. And one item, the Public Works Department will require them to evaluate the Colorado lift station, which is in the alley there just north of Edgewood. They will have to, again, as described previously, do the groundwater monitoring, and that will be part of the design of the project. The project has a high-density land use designation on the west and an urban designation on the east. It complies with the growth policy. We highlighted some of the multifamily design standards that they are complying with, including locating parking to the sides and rear of the project. We want to make sure that the lighting complies with those standards, so we're also recommending a condition of that. They are providing parking in that community building that's over on Colorado, but we'd also like to see them provide a little bit more parking, kind of the temporary parking for bikes at each building. They weren't proposing any fencing, but Planning Board did amend that condition, and we'll talk about that here in a second. We also would like to see cut sheets of their lighting just to make sure that all the lighting is directed down and away from the adjacent neighbors. Trash facilities will be screened. We'll, of course, want to see the landscaping plan before they start construction. While this was under review, you folks were looking at the landscaping chapter and updating that. And there was a couple of items that they'll need to, and that goes into effect on July 5th, so these folks will definitely fall within that. A couple of the more significant changes include making sure that all the parking lot spaces have the every 10 spaces there's a parking lot island, and then also looking at the tree retention regulations, because there are some, again, nice trees on the east side and kind of along the alley as well. Both fire and the police department have reviewed the proposal and found that they can adequately serve the project. The property's in city limits. It will have hydrants. The buildings will be sprinklered. Emergency access is being met, and all the buildings will be constructed and inspected according to the building code. In addition, the city's part of the emergency management plan, which identifies and designates roles and responsibilities for various types of incidences, including which jurisdiction is the lead on the different types of incidents. And emergency evacuation is intended to be specific. It's phased. It's not everybody on the north side leaving at one time, and it depends on the type of incident. Has come up. So again, the applicant is providing one zoning deviation to provide parking in the 5-foot setback, or within 5 feet of the setback. This exemption, they'll still have to do all the landscaping that's required in the new landscaping chapter. In exchange for that, they are providing 44 deed-restricted rentals. The 2022 Housing Needs Assessment identified 800 rentals needed by 2030, 580 of which must be below market to serve our local folks. So we believe they've demonstrated clear community benefit to deviate from the adopted standard. So Planning Board held a public hearing back in May on the 18th, and staff recommended approval of the project. The applicant's representative spoke. 17 members of the public came out. Some were in support of the projects, and others had concern about density fitting into the neighborhood, traffic and groundwater. The minutes and all the public comments we received are in part of your packet. The Planning Board unanimously recommended approval of this project. They did amend condition number 9F, which was the landscaping plan that we were requesting, and they added that a buffering along the edges of the parking lot must be installed to prevent headlights from trespassing onto adjacent properties and provide privacy. That was another concern that was brought up during the public comment. So we are recommending approval, subject to 11 conditions of approval. We are recommending, as part of the engineering plans, that they do a capacity analysis of the Colorado lift station. We want them to install a crosswalk and improve the pedestrian ramp on Colorado Avenue so folks can get over to the other side of Colorado. We would ask them to work with MDT to improve the timing of the intersection at Edgewood and Wisconsin Avenue. And then prior to submitting a building permit, because we don't have final plat, so this is kind of our sort of final plat when there isn't a final plat, is we want to have them submit lighting cut sheets and other information just to make sure there's no light trespass. Tree production zones must be installed and inspected and kept in place during construction. They'll need to do a lot aggregation because, again, there's 5 lots there. The final acceptance of all the improvements needs to be had by Public Works. They'll need architectural review. And then 9F, again, was the one that was amended by Planning Board. Will require deed restrictions for the 44 apartments recorded. And then a minimum of 4 short-term bike parking spaces must be installed per building. Can I answer any questions for you?
Thanks, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy on her staff report? We'll start with Frank and then Rebecca.
Talk to me about the landscaping requirements. I was reading in here about there was a discussion of fencing as opposed to landscaping. Fencing is not required, but landscaping is. Is that correct?
So landscaping is required, and staff had suggested the more offensive item might be headlights shining into someone's backyard. And a lot of the houses that are closer to Texas Avenue, they have fences. So we were thinking, fence next to fence, maybe that wouldn't work quite right.
Right.
But Planning Board wanted to see both fencing and landscaping to provide both the, prevent the headlights from shining into the neighboring property and provide some privacy.
Do we have available in this climate year-round shrubbery or other landscaping tools that would serve the same purpose in terms of limiting light, headlights escaping from the property as opposed to what I call a board fence, and we all know what we call a board fence, pretty ugly, on a long-term basis, then landscaping might be it. We don't have any of those kinds of...
I'm not really sure. I think they'll have a landscape architect on board to help them pick plant material. But yeah, that's what that comment was brought up at Planning Board too, to integrate the project into the neighborhood instead of fencing it off from the neighborhood.
Right, okay, thank you.
Rebecca.
Yeah, Wendy, so we got 3 comments from people that live adjacent to this project that had water displacement. And then in the packet it said that it's the groundwater is at 6 feet below grade. So, but I didn't see any conditions about no basements. Is that not something that you're recommending?
Well, it's an apartment project. I don't know if they're going to have a basement.
Okay, well, I'm wondering, is that something we can condition?
I think if you want to. We have something in the subdivision regulations that says if groundwater is 6 feet or less, that basements are not recommended, but we don't prohibit them. We don't see very many of them.
Right, well, I just was concerned when I saw that people actually considered the water that they got onto their property coming from this site because we allowed fill to be placed there through the Edgewood reconstruction process. And so I'll talk to Craig a little bit more about that. The second question I have is once these are deed restricted, how do we ensure that the renters are charged the 60 to 80% of AMI? Because it will be privately managed, correct?
Right, but they'll work with the Whitefish Housing Authority.
Okay.
And they do annual monitoring. They're the ones that originally say, yeah, this person has the income that meets the criteria.
Okay.
They don't do any of the background checks like the regular kind of rental stuff, but they just verify for the income. And then the property manager does the actual
Okay.
managing.
And then if the apartment changes over, Whitefish Housing Authority is involved again?
Yep.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I talked to someone today who's a builder, and she's approached you guys about having covered bike storage, like covering the bike
Like a little
racks.
carport or something?
Yeah,
Kind of like,
so that they could be protected from the elements.
That's a good
Are
idea.
you- Okay, so you're not opposed to that? Okay.
Yeah, 26 or something are gonna be in a building.
Okay, yeah, and I wasn't sure, I was gonna either ask you or the applicant, because one of them says a bike storage, and then another area says that they're required to do a bike rack with 4
So
spaces.
they're supposed to provide, let me find that section again here.
It's under 9H, a minimum of 4 short-term bicycle parking
Right.
spaces per building must be installed. And then there's another section that talks about the bike storage. I wasn't sure where that was going to be at.
Hang on here, I'll find my section. 10.5. Section is that, but they're providing, in the building next to Colorado, they're providing parking in that building, bike parking in that building. And they have to provide so many spaces per unit, which would then equal only 2 kind of temporary parking spaces per building. And in addition to all the parking they're providing in the building, we want to make sure they have at least 4 per building.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of parking in that one building, and then at least 4 per each building.
I'll ask the applicant a little bit more. All right, thank you.
Further questions for Wendy on her staff report? Thank you, Wendy. We did advertise for a public hearing on ordinance 23-10, and we'll hold that public hearing now. I would first like to invite the applicant or the applicant's representative for comment. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Lori Moffett-Felberg, I'm Senior Vice President of Architecture with Dahlin Group Architecture Planning, and I'll be doing a short presentation for you this evening. I think it'll answer some of the questions that I'm hearing come up as well. So thank you, Wendy, for your staff report. It was very thorough on the nuts and bolts. I'll talk a little bit more about the community itself and some of the planning ideas behind it. So as you can see on the illustrative plan on the screen, you guys have computer screens up
We
there,
do.
right? Okay, good. I was going to say,
Otherwise, we'd be
swiveling
turning
a
around.
lot. So we really, as Wendy mentioned, we oriented the buildings to create the least amount of impact on the neighborhood that we could. So there's a narrow end of 2 stories along Texas, a small building on Colorado, and then everything else is towards the center of the site. We also took the vehicular access through, and you can see how you come in at both ends along the southern edge, and it jogs around 2 of the buildings, specifically so we don't get cut through traffic. We didn't want to create another cut-through opportunity when that alley is already there. We're not taking any access off that alley. But it interrupts the flow, and so it really creates this centralized community towards the center of the site. We also didn't want to do any building on the portion of the lot that connects to Waverly. That's just open space. It's just landscaped, and as Wendy mentioned, final landscaping plans will be coming in. But there'll be sidewalks and connectivity. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a zoom in on that western portion of the site. That smaller building along Colorado, we set it back from Colorado because there are a couple of really big trees there. And so we're just avoiding what we can. And then we created an outdoor area directly off of the community room. There'll be a slide that shows you an enlargement of the ground floor of that building. But you can see how the sidewalks connect through. There's great connectivity all the way through and across the site for the residents. Next slide, please. And this is the eastern half where that central open space is. The building that is page east to west is that two-story building. Next slide. So this is showing the open space calculation. And so we took the city regulations and did all the dimensional controls and mapped out the percentage of open space to make sure we could meet that. Next slide. So these are some of the views. So this is from Colorado. This is that smaller three-story building. And you can see how it's set back. There's a nice amount of landscaping in front of it. And then you have great pedestrian and vehicular access into the community itself. Next slide. So this is that building. And this is the ground floor I was talking about. So there's 2 units that are adjacent to Colorado. And then this back area where there's units above has the community area, the leasing office, maintenance shop, and then a bike storage room. So there's secure, lockable bike storage for the residents. So even beyond something that would give you just rain shelter, this is secured storage with racks. And so people who have bikes that they're very concerned with who live there can put them in this room. And then the bike storage at each building is actually, a bike rack for guests, more temporary coming and going with your bike. But we've provided a pretty nice sized room that would accommodate 26 bikes that's secured for the residents to put their bikes. And then there's restrooms in this building and some storage as well. So we feel like it gives a really nice sense of community, grounding to this community, and to really build this sense of neighborliness and integration with the folks who are going to live here. Next slide. So then this is the Texas entrance perspective, and you can see the architecture changed a little bit. On the Colorado side, we had similar massing that's breaking up the facade, so we don't have big planar elements. It's actually broken down into fairly small segments, combination of shed roofs and gable ends, and then some flat area up on the roof for any kind of rooftop mechanical or anything that'll be hidden from view. And then color blocking to really break these up. But again, this is a 2-story elevation along Texas that brings that scale down to meet the neighborhood. Next slide. So these are some of the colors and materials that we're using, and this happens to be the Colorado side. So you can see it's a nice mix of materials. It's going to allow us to break up the facades and do some color blocking, some material changes, and really create a sense of movement along the top line of the building, so it doesn't have one roof on it. It has a lot of breakup in the roof and in the facade itself. Next slide. So this, the next set of slides is really in response to some of the public comments that came up at Planning Commission. We really did listen to what was said and wanted to make sure the information was available to everyone. So what this does is it really shows just how big the setbacks are, not in terms of regulated setbacks, but in terms of distance between the buildings and the neighboring buildings. And so you can see some of them are 100 feet. Some of them are 77 feet. Even with my glasses, I can't read all of those. But we oriented the parking along the edges because it pushed the units inboard and away from the neighbors. And so it was very intentionally done, and we provided this in this packet and in this presentation to answer some of those questions. We wanted to make sure people knew we heard them and that we had actually looked at it. We knew the numbers. Next slide. So this one is also in response to the concern over headlights into rear yards. And there was a whole lot of discussion at Planning Commission about, is it landscaping, is it fencing, is it a wall? We didn't want a wall because we thought that really made it unfriendly. And so we took our best shot at what we thought we heard. And so in this diagram, you can see where we're noting a good neighbor fencing, which would be your standard 5-foot wood fence that would provide privacy along those rear yards to the single-family homes. That's really what we were looking at. And then we also have areas where we're noting low fencing or landscape buffers, depending on what was adjacent to us. And so we were looking at a combination of the two to try to create what we felt was the best integration of the neighborhood. The fences that are out there right now are a whole bunch of different kinds and styles. And we also thought, well, if we provide one good neighbor fence, it kind of makes a nice clean edge for not only our community, but for our adjacent neighbors as well. So that was what we thought we heard and what we were proposing to do in response to that condition. And I'm happy to answer more questions on that too. Next slide. There was also a question about could we close off one of the access points, and we really can't. We need it for fire access, and we want to make sure that that functions really nicely. And as I said earlier, we think it works well because of the jog in that connection all the way through. So you don't visually see through that you can cut through the block, but we do need all 3 access points for fire and life safety. Next slide. And then neighborhood context. As Wendy mentioned, there are a number of multifamily buildings in the neighborhood, generally towards the Colorado side. And so we went through, and there's a small plan in the upper right corner that maps out where those are. And we just grabbed images just to show the scale and the context. We thought that was important for everybody to see, that we're not breaking new ground in the neighborhood. Next slide. The other thing that the applicant has done is a tremendous amount of community outreach, including a website for the project, meetings with neighbors on site, individual meetings with neighbors, meeting with Whitefish Community Foundation, the Housing Authority, Flathead Families for Responsible Growth. They've done a lot of outreach over the last, since really June of last year. So for a year, they've been trying to make sure the information got out to the community, and there was dialogue, because we understand that it changes things. But we think that there's such a benefit to meeting some of the housing crisis that Whitefish is facing that it is an important project for the city, but we want to make sure people are heard. So they've done a lot of work on that front. And I think that might be my last slide. Yes, thank you. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Lori. Appreciate the presentation.
Okay.
Any questions for Lori? Rebecca?
Would you be willing to go up to a 6-foot fence? I mean, is there some reason why you stopped at 5?
It was just a little bit more neighborly, but we certainly could.
Okay, and then what do you think about covering the outside, the bike stands? Would you be okay with that?
That's a little trickier because it starts to impact where we can put them. If you think about in a community like this, because we've handled the resident secure indoor dry storage, this is really for people coming and going. And I would want to make sure that what that is doesn't cause a maintenance issue long term. And then whatever it is doesn't block anybody's windows, doesn't get in way of any lighting or anything like that. Oh, and by the way, we're happy to do dark sky lights. Not a problem with that. We will certainly provide the cut sheets for downcast lights, dark sky, but I digress. So we would probably prefer not to cover just the bike racks because I think that's going to create a whole nother set of things that we're not anticipating dealing with, because we already have the secure covered indoor storage. So
But,
we would prefer not to.
Only 26 of them, though, for a lot of people. So how will you, oh, you're just assuming people will store them in the apartments?
We find it's a mix. For myself, because of the bike I ride, I would have it in my home. And so we find that it's kind of a mixed bag. I would not expect people to be storing bikes outside much in the winter. I see it, but you never know, right? So
Okay.
that's just our perspective.
The other question I had was about drainage from this property with a 6-foot groundwater. Are you putting in basements? Have
No,
you-
there are no
Okay.
basements.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Any further questions for Lori? Not seeing any. Thanks very
Great,
much.
thank you.
We'll move on to public comments. Now would be your opportunity to express your opinion on this project to the council. Name and address for the record, please.
Nathan Dugan, 937 Kalispell Avenue. I am also the president of Shelter WF. We, as an organization, are in full support of this project. Wanted to just go through a few things here. First of all, the planning board hearing, I thought, on this was like pretty amazing. Don't know if you were able to watch that. Probably reading the minutes doesn't give the same vibe of like how it felt in that room. But the last time we went through this process with a similar project, it was a very different feel in the room. Felt like the need was well recognized, and the benefit of the 44 deed restricted affordable units was well recognized, and the issues that people had were fairly reasonable in my opinion. Things like headlights shining into windows and that sort of thing. And you saw the result of that planning board meeting here today, and they've kind of addressed those issues. And so that process was just like good to see, in my opinion. A couple things about this proposal specifically. It's a great place to build this. So close to downtown, walking distance, easy walking distance, easy biking distance, easy walking distance even in the winter, especially if we widen that path and it gets plowed a little bit better than it has historically. But this is kind of where we need to build things, within this radius so that we can establish an effective public transportation network in the future. So the more people we can have concentrated to this central area located downtown, the more effective our public transportation system will be, and people can use it because the stops can be very close to where they live, and it's just as convenient as hopping in your car, or maybe even more convenient when the traffic is terrible outside. And then just want to touch on the 44 deed restricted units that are in this. That's not an insignificant number. I think that you all understand that. I think Mountain View Manor has a few more units than that, but I don't think I'm wrong in saying that there's not a single 100% affordable unit that has, or 100% affordable development that has provided that many deed restricted units. They're all smaller than that. And so I think keeping that in mind, yes, it's 30%, but it is bigger than what we get every 3, 4, 5, 6 or more years when we can get enough funding to build a 100% affordable unit. And then, clearly there are a lot of people searching for rentals all the time anyway, and having a market rate option they can go into with roommates or whatever is better than not having an option where they can live. So please vote to approve this proposal. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathan. Who's next?
iPad, you guys are ready for this? Amy Boring, Montana Avenue, Whitefish. To start, thank you guys, but I want to address a few people. Mallory and Nathan, the champions behind Shelter Whitefish, as well as Cameron and the team at Flathead Families for Sustainable Growth. I believe and stand by your efforts. I'm 100% behind workforce housing. I hope I can get through this. Thank you to Hannah Whitney, the project manager, for meeting with me on a Sunday to listen to a few of my ideas. I'm a storyteller coming in hot with a soccer analogy, so bear with me. I like to think that we have established that we are all on the same team. This has taken a very sharp, unexpected hairpin turn from where I stood a few weeks ago, and to all the people that I mentioned above, I'm sorry for that. Hannah's awesome. She is operating with a 100-horsepower Montana work ethic, juggling the fine art of performing her job well, understanding the desperate need for workforce housing, and the delicate dance of holding the line of integrity of this project. She referred to this project as her baby, and I believe her. But I feel called to share what the local in her cannot. Sorry. When I stop and think about the position that I play in this community, the thing I land on every time is that I am a midfielder. I walk in my truth to the best of my ability and try to keep the greatest good for all at the center of everything I participate in. When we come upon a new understanding of something that allows us to change when I come upon a new understanding of something, we are allowed to change our minds. I'm asking you to all be very quick on your feet today. As a midfielder, I'm happy to pass the ball off to let people run with it. I'm just fine with the assist, but I will also fall back and play an even stronger defense when necessary. City officials, you are our coaches and referees. Council, you are our elected goalkeepers. And this town feels like we're in a never-ending game of overtime to hold the World Cup title. We have to balance the scales between the quality of life, safety of the residents, and also be protectors of the vibration of the land, the wildlife, the trees, and the water table that cannot speak for itself. I think we can all agree that all healthy relationships, actions must match words. I came to Hannah with the intention of standing beside two long-term residents to offer simple design, well, maybe not simple, but to offer design suggestions that would cater a bit more to the quality of life. They have both helped Whitefish be what we love so much. Flower, who's here. Flower, who built the coolest shake shingle house that I've ever seen, with an intentional view of Big Mountain from her loft 20 years ago, maybe more. It's about to have a view of a wall of windows and a really crappy interior light. Why does it not seem to matter that she loses that in the name of progress? And Andy Diafos, a longtime owner of one of the last standing local favorite restaurants, Wrap and Roll, has fed most of you for decades. Whether you know him personally or not, if you've been paying any sort of attention, you know he and his family have endured the unspeakable. In June of 2020, the brutal murder of Emily Moeller, the mother of his son Isaiah, as well as Isaiah's 3 half-brothers, grew up in a beautiful 100-year-old farmhouse on Texas. That half-acre of rural property is about to be surrounded on all sides like the house in Up. Then the Averils bought the downtowner where his restaurant has lived since the 90s and will be torn down at some point in the near future. It's a lot, and I imagine that he feels defeated. After speaking casually with Hannah for over an hour and processing our discussion, I find myself dropping back to play defense. And here's why. Hannah told me that they barely passed the traffic impact report. These fires are next level, and I believe the lack of sustainable infrastructure in place pulls us all out of integrity in the realm of public safety. If the fire department is so concerned about needing 2 driveways on Texas, surely they are concerned about not being able to efficiently get over the viaduct. Oh wait, I'll keep going. Okay. When I suggested relocating Building 9, which is the one on the side of Andy's property, to have all 4 buildings in the center, leaving room for snow in the winter and community gardens and tranquil green space in the summer, that it was in the care of the residents' mental health and to hold the integrity of the rural nature of the neighborhood on Texas, as well as removing a wall of windows looking down into Andy's incredibly peaceful backyard. By the way, Emily's garden has vegetables in it for the first time in years. Her response was that the engineers are extremely concerned about the water table, which is why they have green space built between 2 buildings. They have to build massive holding tanks to hold the water and divert it out to underground infrastructure created by the city on Texas. To cover nearly 6 acres with a solid slab of concrete seems out of environmental integrity. She slipped and shared that investors were trying to avoid building a website nor offer it up to public opinion to get Ruiz to slide everything past the public. I believe they are the ones that need to be wrangled a bit. When I suggested taking a bit of profit for a smaller footprint, I was told Ruiz won't be making any profits, but his grandchildren might. Someone is making a profit, or else there would be no reason to attempt this, to slide this under the public radar. Oh shit. I would like to see more transparency regarding the financials. I need a drink, I'm sorry. When I asked Andy, I brought up offering a solid chunk of money to Andy that would allow him to make a move that he felt good about. She expressed that she had heard a lot about him, yet had no idea about the murder of Emily. Her response was that Ruiz made Andy Diafos an offer and he refused, and that way he wasn't going to play the game of him holding out for a larger offer. When I asked Andy what they offered him, he said they didn't make him an offer, that he got a voicemail that said, "Let me know if you're interested in selling your house." I get messages like this and I don't own a house. When I suggested that Ruiz, the builder of Wild and Gunsight, which we all love, to consider the possibility of throwing him an assist in relocating his restaurant, I was told that they're not interested in looking at building anything else in Whitefish because we're a pain. That Sioux Falls hands out permits like candy with no opposition. We've proven to be difficult. I'm also skeptical of anyone that is willing to tear down 2 beautiful craftsman homes and call it beautification. Regarding the fencing, I was told that a solid fence would be placed around the perimeter. It is also important to reiterate the message that we as a community are not of the not in my backyard persuasion, but rather one that has a strong sense of discretion and protection. She closed with, "Let's just get this approved, and then we might be able to move things around." I agreed with her in the moment, but once I processed all of the information, it felt off. Why can't that be done before? After I left Wild, I pulled a Velvet Sullivan Ravenwood combo and went to the spot directly behind Andy's property, found a sit spot, and listened to the land. I stood perfectly still inside an overgrown tree, wrapped in its branches. The wind rustled the leaves. The aspens on the other side of the alley sparkled in the wind. A few raindrops fell on a field of wild daisies, and a butterfly fluttered past my face. A hummingbird made an appearance, and a very pregnant doe walked about 15 feet in front of me and eventually nestled herself into the grass, and my eyes filled with tears.
Amy, if you don't mind wrapping up
It's
pretty
wrapping.
quickly.
It's wrapping.
We typically limit public
I know.
comment to
I
3 minutes.
appreciate
Thank you very much.
you. I'm almost done. I'll try to read faster. It wasn't as long, but I can't breathe.
Take your time.
They filled again as I typed this in a building that Ruiz built that I love and appreciate very much. In the last 24 hours, I have struggled with coming up here and saying any of this for fear of retaliation and putting workforce housing and pulling workforce housing as punishment and making it even worse for Andy Flower and other surrounding residents. Andy and I had a text conversation last night about whether or not I should speak out on this, and he told me that he supported my observations, that it's just not simply appropriate for that piece of land for a myriad of reasons, which you just listed. Quality of life and privacy of the neighbors would be at the end of that list, myself included. One might hope, though, that it would be a part of the thought process in terms of design and density. Okay, I'm almost done, I promise. A few weeks ago, I had a brief conversation with 18-year-old Isaiah Diafos about the previous city planning meeting that took place. He responded so sweetly that he used to attend city council meetings with his mom, and as my heart broke right there on the porch, I encouraged him to continue to participate, that we needed young people to hop in. As I typed this today, I realized that if Emily were here, it would be her standing here. But she's not. So while her and I have an insane amount of mutual friends, I never met her. And everything that I've put into this feels like I've been called off the bench as her sub. I don't want to oppose this, but I don't think a green light is warranted either. I'm asking for you to delay for the many reasons that I stated above, and that if Ruiz is doing this for the community, as he says he is, he will be receptive to continue to work together to find a more viable solution. I think a moratorium on building north of the viaduct is in order at this point until proper infrastructure is in place. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Hello, my name is Mallory Phillips. I live on Kalispell Avenue in Whitefish, and I hope that you vote in favor of the Whitefish Corridor community. I will try to keep it short and simple. There are many reasons I believe that this development should be approved. Many of them are connected directly with my belief that people should have choices about whether or not they live in this community. Right now it is only those that are wealthy or privileged or longtime locals like me that have those choices. The first thing that is valuable about this location is the prime spot that gives different people of the different incomes more choices. 44 of these homes will be deed restricted, like was talked about earlier. This is 44 homes for people who currently do not have a choice of whether or not they get to live in Whitefish without being cost burdened. You want your community members to have choice, otherwise we will without a doubt turn into a hollowed out Montana version of Jackson, Wyoming or Aspen, in which community members are constantly having to move if they can find housing at all, or living 10 people to a house, or live in their vehicles just so they can stay in the communities they love. In addition to giving them choices around Whitefish, it also gives them choices of whether or not they get to live in a neighborhood where they can walk to the grocery store, downtown, work, etc. On a crazy summer day when traffic is backed up on Baker and Spokane, they have more options like taking the snow bus to Safeway for groceries or walking down to the tap house for dinner. Next, they have choices around getting to live in a socioeconomically mixed apartment and neighborhood. Right now, we are pushing many of our lower income community members in places that are homogeneously low income only, like Evergreen. We push all the poor people to Evergreen. Socioeconomic diversity in neighborhoods and towns has been shown to create more empathetic communities. We lose a lot when we segregate people into economic boxes. Lastly, affordable housing is intermixed throughout the building and gives the community members choices to accept a higher paying job without fear of losing their housing because they make too much money. In a world where there are so many people that do not have choices because of the systems that play around them, it is important that the City Council approve this development to maintain socioeconomic diversity and give more people in our community more choices. Thank you.
Thanks, Mallory. Flower.
I am Flower Bartholomew, 27 Colorado Avenue. We do need affordable housing badly. Before I moved back into my house this past October, I was renting my house out for under $1,000 when I know I could have gotten probably double. So that's how much I believe that our workforce needs affordable housing. And I'm not a NIMBY. We probably need it in my backyard. I won't be a broken record with all the other people who talked about bottlenecks and traffic and all that stuff, but it is definitely a concern, that, and traffic and fire and all those issues. And again, I won't repeat a lot of what I wrote down that's already been said, but I would strongly like to encourage green fencing instead of wood or metal fencing. As Frank Sweeney mentioned, trees instead of a fence would be preferable. And there are lots, I happen to be a landscaper and I do a lot of native landscaping, and there are tons of native trees and shrubs that would work, that would grow taller than a fence and block out more than a fence would anyway. So I would love that. And lastly, the architect talked about bringing down the scale to meet the neighborhood, and I get that there's other 3-story apartments on Colorado. And again, I said this at the planning board meeting, but I would love to, I beseech that there's a 2-story in front of me and not a 3-story. And yeah, woe is me if I lose my view of Big Mountain, but if they're doing it for the other end, for the neighbors at the other end, why would they not do it for the neighbors at the Colorado end? Thank you, and thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Flower. Cameron.
Good evening. Cameron Blake, 825 Black Sand Trail in Whitefish. And I am on the board of Flathead Families for Responsible Growth and representing them tonight. FFRG is passionate about helping guide responsible growth that honors the safety and our quality of resources and retains our sense of community and character. While we all need to be conscious of the added congestion and egress issues north of the viaduct, Flathead Families for Responsible Growth supports this project as proposed with the affordable housing commitment and a satisfactory plan to address the stormwater runoff concerns raised by the neighbors. We want to commend the Whitefish Corridor project for including the affordable component and workforce housing that is so needed in our community, and encourage you to vote in the affirmative for it tonight. At the same time, we encourage the city to maintain a long view and look carefully and critically at any developer's requests for exceptions result in additional density. We strongly recommend that given the congestion already existing, the city must determine how much more development can take place north of the viaduct given the current transportation system and crossings. This is one of the issues that will define our future. Thank you.
Thanks, Cameron.
Hi there, my name is Mac Phi. I live at 6005 St. Moritz Drive in Whitefish. Just want to say this is my first time doing this, so it brings me no joy to come out and publicly speak on a beautiful night where I could be riding my bike. But the only reason I would come out is because I am very in favor of this development. I definitely see the housing crisis we constantly hear about as something that is seriously needs to be addressed, and I'm tired of seeing my friends and people that have lived their entire lives here having to move to other areas and leave Whitefish because that's, you know, they're what make this community what it is, and I also don't want to see it become a hollowed out, empty husk of a town like we see in other mountain towns. And I think Whitefish is at this precipice where we can, start to become like a benchmark of what a mountain town can be versus, just following the path of some of the other towns we've seen. So I just wanted to say I support this project, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mick. Appreciate your comments tonight. Further public testimony?
Hi. My name is Lena. I live on 5th Avenue East in Kalispell, and I'm here because I want you guys to vote yes on this project. Right now, there's some really awesome Montana young people that are in court over the climate lawsuit to protect the future generations of this amazing place. And I think that in the spirit of that, I very much support the idea of Whitefish developing intentionally. And I really support this as an infill housing project. The improved walkability, the improved bikeability, and like Nathan mentioned, the improved opportunity for future public transportation is really important in this project. The preservation of green spaces as an Indigenous person to me is incredibly important. I've seen too many green spaces fall to what we call sprawl, of just not developing intentionally. And so the reduction in emissions alone, when we look at infill projects, I know we're talking about more traffic, but if you're thinking about how, 57% of the workforce in Whitefish doesn't live in Whitefish, so we already have so much emissions happening, so much traffic coming into the city, that even if we can limit that just a little bit, that's going to do so much for our public spaces and so much for our green spaces when we look in the future. Affordable housing is so important for workforce, but it's also not just a workforce. When you're thinking about people who are on a fixed income, this can be families, this can be veterans, this can be elderly people, teachers. It's not just the people that work at the restaurants, even though you should care about those people as well. It's a broader scope than I think we're thinking of, and so I think 30%, it can go up, but like Nathan said, that's an incredible number, and I think that we should really be proud of that. As Flower said, I actually really agree with her point about green fencing. I think there's a lot of potential with this particular project to include some native Montana wildlife and flora, and I think that that is an incredible idea, and you guys should totally work with the people in the community and that do that, because there are a lot of those people, to make this an even better space. Thank you so much. Vote yes for this project.
Thanks, Lena. Thanks for traveling north to visit with us tonight. Lisa.
Lisa Jones. My husband and I actually own a home on 630 Colorado Avenue, and I've lived in that home and always enjoyed the incredible open space and beauty of the view of Great Northern, and knowing that someday that wouldn't be there. And so now that day is here, and so as I am we have a renter that's lived there for 7 years, that we provided an affordable place to live, and affordable and workforce housing is an important issue for me as it is for this entire community. I wanted to and I am also, I've seen the process, and I've seen that the developer has really met so many of the needs and has been very thoughtful. I mean, it is in the middle of single-family homes, but very thoughtful in all of the mitigating things that they can possibly do, and sound like they're listening to the public. I didn't attend the planning meeting, but I did read about it, and so because of all of those reasons, I want to lend my support for this project. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lisa. Further public testimony. Nancy.
Nancy Schuber, 110 Bay Point Drive. I live north of the viaduct, but I still think it's a great idea. I think the design is well done. I'm in favor of it, and I encourage you as well. I want to bring up one little point. I think the ruling on fencing within the city is 4 feet. Might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure about that.
Thanks, Nancy. Sir.
Hi, my name's Mick Ruiz. I'm one that was hoping to build this, and I just wanted to make a couple things clear that I've heard about me tonight that, that I don't think should be setting straight. I've worked my entire life. I work every day still, I have my boots on. When someone says that we get handed permits in Columbia Falls, we have, just our family alone, probably invested $35 million in Columbia Falls when no one wanted to be there. We have restaurants there. We built the first hotel, Cedar Creek Lodge, and I built that just so the people, that the other teams that would come from Browning or out of the other towns, they had a place to actually stay and then spend money in Columbia Falls. There is no way that Columbia Falls has ever just rubber stamped our stuff. I think they're very appreciative of seeing a town that was dilapidated, down nucleus. We bought a bunch of buildings for hardly nothing, and at that time I didn't have much money. I built a company and was able to sell it, a scaffold builder, what I am by trade, and instead of just cruising in the boat somewhere or investing in stocks, I said, I wanted to invest in my community, and that's what we did over there. And there's a lot of people now that say, wow, Columbia Falls, it's an up-and-coming place. It's cool. We're opening Monaco Steakhouse and Sports Bar, you know, next week. And when people say that for my children that I might not be making a penny, but for my grandchildren, that statement was what, yes, I had made to Hannah, like, I might not see the money in my lifetime, but if I wanted to see the money in my lifetime, I really wouldn't say I would give 30% housing. I'd be like that and say, you know, I just can't afford it. I need all this money right now. I don't care. And that's not what I'm doing. It's not what I'm doing in Columbia Falls. I'm building 200 units in Kalispell where no one wanted to build, right by the mall there, because people needed affordable housing. You know, we invested our money there. And so when they start, I get attacked. I shouldn't probably say nothing, but it just isn't right, you know, for someone to come that doesn't know what we've did and how hard we work every day. I mean, I have my jeans and my boots on every single day to work. And maybe not in my lifetime I'm going to see all this fruits of it, but yes, if my grandchildren or them or someone else, and hopefully they grow up and they work every day and they do it, but we're not looking for an instant home run or doing anything. When I bought those properties over there, I never thought it would be this kind of design with the Dallin Group, you know, did for us. It's amazing. You know, it's like, this is, where else could this be? What else? I mean, it was like a perfect marriage, you know, and at one time I said, oh, I'm going to buy that house. I'll get that one. And then for the guy that has his last place there, you know, I just met him one day and I said, hey, you know, if you're ever interested in selling that, that would be awesome. There was no pressure because I believe we should, the ones that were here before have every right as much as the ones that want to come here. And one of my things that I always say is, go ask the Blackfeet Indian Reservation how they felt before people came over here. You don't see them harping and saying things, you know. I just think that if the city and if you guys want something, we worked really hard to try to do it. And I appreciate everybody listening. I just don't want everybody to think we're a greedy developer, because that's not what we are. I didn't even know how to build a building. I was a scaffold builder. My attorney was Frampton and Purdy. You guys know him here in Whitefish. And they used to be in the old Frank Lloyd Wright building. And they sold it to me, and then afterwards someone said, hey, you know that's Frank Lloyd Wright? And I was quoted, I don't even know who he is. Because I had never built anything. And when they came over to me and they asked if I would work with them, I said, yes, yeah, I will. You know, I bought it for $1.4 million. I'll give you guys one whole year. We don't even need that much time. We have all these people. We'll go this and we'll take care of it, and we'll do this and we'll buy this back for you. I said, I don't even want a penny. We waited a whole entire year till we tore that down, and look what's over there now. Beautiful buildings, right? I mean, I'm willing to work with people and more than fair. So whatever you guys decide, it's okay on my end. You know what I mean? I'm only trying to do something that's better for the whole community. Thank you.
Thanks for commenting, Mick, and that's certainly not the sentiment of this governing body. I assure you that. Thanks for your comments tonight. Further public testimony? Michelle, anyone online? I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. I would prefer. I saw Giuseppe's hand.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance number 23 is it 4 right now?
It's 10.
Oh. Number 10, an ordinance approving the Whitefish Community Corridor Residential Plan Unit Development to develop 146 units in 7 buildings on 6.56 acres at 105 Colorado Avenue, 709 Waverly Place, and 60 to 124, 136, and 152 Texas Avenue, Whitefish, in the first reading. And I have a question.
Let's get a second first. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Giuseppe.
Can I speak and ask the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, we're focusing on the 44 deeded affordable units. I would focus on the bigger picture as well, because these are 146 units. So thank you to the regulations and to the willingness of the developer to deed 44 units. They could have did it a few fewer, I think, so they even went past it. At the same time, 146 units, if built the way they look like, will attract and will fair market compete within the marketplace. So in my mind, this is the type of growth that can happen and needs to happen and hopefully will happen in our little town. And change is forever. My question is, since this is an ordinance, does it have to be voted by 4 people tonight?
It's a supermajority requirement, which is 4 out of the 5 councilors
you.
this evening. Thanks, Giuseppe. Further comments? Rebecca?
Yep, I'd like to add a condition that no basements will be built. If that would be number 12, if I could get a second.
Can you formalize that?
I make a motion to add a condition number 12, which reads, no basements are to be built, period.
Is there a second to the motion? This would be a friendly amendment to add condition number 12.
For purposes of discussion, I will be happy to second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Rebecca, would you like to speak to that motion?
Yeah, just, it is only 6 feet for groundwater. I know the architect has assured us that that won't happen, but sometimes what I've seen, even though I do believe this is a really nice design, sometimes we approve something and then the project is sold to another developer, and I just want to be clear that whoever develops it, that they protect the neighborhood by not displacing water to the adjacent neighbors.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further comment on the friendly amendment? This will be to add condition number 12, restricting the use of basements. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And the motion does carry on a 3-2 vote with Councilor Davis and Caltabiano voting in opposition, which brings us back to the original motion for approval with the added condition number 12. Further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor,
Frank.
I'd like to have a little more discussion on the fencing issues that were raised, and I'm happy with a 5-foot fence as opposed to a 6-foot fence. I think that would more than adequately block the light, which is what is key here. If I were comfortable, or if I could get comfortable with the concept that there could be, quote, a green fence. Again, given my experience up here, most of the bushes and low-level stuff doesn't retain its greenery or its leaves to be a block during the winter, which I think is a critical time. If that could be entertained, I would be happy to have that as a proposal to form that fence or that barrier. Is there any support, or is there any support from staff as to whether or not that's a practical solution rather than a 5-foot board fence?
Dave, would you like to speak to that? Or Wendy, excuse me.
You know, the way the condition is written, it says buffering along edges of parking lot must be installed to prevent headlights from trespassing onto adjacent properties and provide privacy. I mean, I think that leaves it open for them to, you know, work with their landscape architect, figure out where fences are better, where berms might be better, where shrubbery might be better, as long as it's preventing headlights from trespassing and they're providing privacy.
I'm comfortable with that. Thank you very much.
Further comments, Frank?
Yeah, I'm going to support this motion. I think it's very important, but I think we all have to take into consideration here, particularly those of us that are interested in affordable workforce housing. When you add density to areas and when you add elevation to areas that are single family, we damage in some respect our neighbors and the people who have been here quite some time, people who are not wealthy necessarily. And I think we all have to temper our enthusiasm when we're talking about these kinds of projects with that fact. I believe that this is a project that will serve this community, and I think I'm supportive of it 100%. But let's not forget that it does some damage and it does some injury to some of our neighbors, people just like you. So with that, I have no further comment.
Further comments from the council? Mick, I just wanted to thank you for coming to do business in Whitefish. I was up on Nucleus on Saturday at North Fork Pizza, and I frequent the downtown there as well, just as a way to get out of Whitefish, quite frankly. And you've done wonders over there. So I just wanted to say we certainly appreciate you taking an interest in Whitefish. Thank you. Further comments?
I really appreciate all the people that put their hearts into public comment, and it's always hard to make changes in established neighborhoods, and we always weigh if it's going to be harmful to people or if we're going to be getting enough community benefit. But this is a very thoughtful design, and when you're up here, you go through every single comment and you weigh whether or not you should change your decision-making or not. And I just really appreciate people bringing up their concerns, but I do think it's wonderful that we're going to be getting affordable housing, and that the architect has put in so much thought to how this project will be interfacing with the existing neighborhood. I'm hoping it's successful for everybody, to be honest. So thank you.
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. Thanks for everyone for coming out tonight and sharing your comments. Appreciated. Let folks filter out for a minute.
You don't think they're here for the budget?
I'll wage a bet.
Did that amendment actually pass without a supermajority?
It does.
It does.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't when we did it last time.
Angie told me amendments can pass without a supermajority vote. The ordinance has to pass a supermajority. If I'm wrong there, then it did not pass, but she'll correct.
I think we tried to modify out the duplexes out of the landscaping plan before. Passed on a 3-2.
I'll check with her. We can always revisit that. I think it's covered either way, but I like the condition to some degree, because if it did flip hands. We'll move on to item 6B of our agenda, consideration of approving our city manager's proposed budget as the FY24 preliminary budget, and setting the final public hearing on the capital improvement project and FY24 final budget for August 21, 2023. Dana.
Thank you, John. Good evening, Council. After 2 budget work sessions, I'm happy to present the fiscal year 24 preliminary budget for your consideration this evening. For a full detailed overview of the budget, you can read my the budget transmittal that's on page 508 of your packet. But I really want to focus on the high-level items that we have discussed, but for the public to understand our budget, I think, a little bit more in detail. It is a reappraisal year. The Montana Department of Revenue reappraises taxable property on a 2-year cycle. So we will see our taxable value adjusted by both newly taxable property as well as increases in the market of currently taxable property as of December 31st of 2022. Now, we will not receive our official tax valuation until August when we do prepare for the final budget. So for fiscal year 24, the taxable value is estimated to grow by 10%. Some of you may have received your property tax estimates from the Department of Revenue, and the valuation changes is likely more than 10%, I will tell you that. But it's important to understand that just because your taxable property value increased, it does not mean that the taxes assessed on those properties will also increase by the same percentage. The Montana Department of Revenue has issued a notice of property assessment town hall that they'll be hosting down in Kalispell on July 12th. From 3 to 6 p.m. at the Hilton Garden Inn, and they also have virtual events as well. So we have that information posted on our website, and we'll have that on social media, because it's very important, again, to understand the way that they prepare those forms. Interestingly enough, all they do is take our mill levy from last year and apply that mill levy to the new values. Well, that's actually wrong, because our general mill levy authority is limited to newly taxable property plus 1/2 the rate of inflation, which is determined by the state. So it is a little bit of misinformation, but I'm really happy that they're taking the step to try to educate the public on the impacts here. In fact, when you do get your top property tax valuation, you'll see a form similar to like what we got for the city, and it does show annual growth rates, population changes, income changes for Flathead County. And I'm happy to report Whitefish at the very bottom, we actually over the past 10 years have had a decrease in taxes by 0.64%. So keep that in mind as we talk about the budget here moving forward. We have done a lot over the past 3 years providing property tax decreases. This year, though, we will be seeing a property tax increase. That is due to changes in our property tax relief from resort tax, not related to the automatic 25%, but the additional amount that is given back to property taxpayers each year, that there is some. So we are seeing the property tax relief reduce by going down to about 46 mills versus the 58 mills of fiscal year 23. So it's about a $385,000 difference in relief. So with taking into account increasing cost, the reduction in anticipated revenues, and that decrease in additional property tax relief, we are proposing to reduce our general levy by 7 mills to offset that change. And so we are seeing a mill increase of 5.389 mills. When it comes to property taxes, you have our levies, and then you also have maintenance assessments that show up. For maintenance assessments, we are actually recommending that all maintenance assessments remain at the same rates as FY23, with the exception of our commercial lighting maintenance district, which is proposed to decrease 25% based on adequate funding of operations and savings when we move to LED lights. For a residential property with no new improvements, and a market value of about $526,000, representing a 10% increase from the prior valuation, they would see about a 10.78% increase in their city's portion of their property tax bill, so about $80. That will offset last year's $98 decrease we gave. So in essence, we're still $18 less than fiscal year 22 in a property tax bill for that example. Of course, if our valuations come back higher than the 10%, which was just an estimate, I have a crystal ball I use every year, we will adjust the mills so that the actual revenue generated would still be similar to what is proposed in this budget. So that impact would still remain fairly similar. With the proposed changes that Michelle distributed, and it's in your packet on page 646 of the packet, but with the proposed changes since the 2 budget work sessions, we will have a fund balance projected for property tax supported funds of about 35.93%, or about $5,050,000 roughly. And that's shown on page 647 of your packet, where we provided an updated budget summary. For the final budget, we'll obviously adjust beginning fund balance numbers because we don't have year-end financials yet for fiscal year 23. We're close, we've got a few days and counting. So we will update that as time goes on. Capital spending is projected to decrease about $4.9 million compared to the prior year as we wrapped up construction on the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project. Property tax supported funds are seeing capital spending increase a bit though, about $215,000 roughly. Again, that's mostly due to the fire engine that we recently bid and awarded. That was about $245,000 higher than anticipated, but for which we had adequate fund balance to utilize for that project. Personnel, when it comes to city personnel, given the market conditions and needs to retain employees, we are recommending a 5% increase across the board for employees. That would be a 3.5% cost of living adjustment and a 3% cost of living adjustment and 2% longevity step on the pay matrix. The FY24 budget does propose to add 2 additional full-time positions. We've discussed this during the work sessions, but we have a new SRO position that would be stationed at the high school and elementary school, and then we'd be able to have one at the middle school. That would be a 50-50 cost share with the school district for a total cost of roughly $95,000. And we're also proposing adding a street maintenance position as we've seen mileage increase, and we have more additional maintenance needs than we did prior. That cost is approximately $76,000 for fiscal year '24. And almost done. The proposed budget for fiscal year '24, as presented with the changes noted on page 646 of the packet, will continue to support the city's endeavor to provide exceptional services to our community, adjust to growth and demand, and improve our facilities, all while considering the impacts to our property taxpayers. I would like to say thanks to our finance director, Laney, the other department directors, and other city staff that has assisted in the preparation of this year's budget. They've all done a fantastic job preparing their budgets and helping me get this budget to you. So thanks for your review and consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Laney, and all department directors. Any questions for Dana on her FY24 budget? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6B, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Any public comment this evening? Michelle, anyone online? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to Frank for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the fiscal year 2024 preliminary budget.
And set the meeting date or the final budget for August 21st, 2023.
That works for me.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Caltabiano. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. We'll move on to item 7, communication from our planning director, Dave Taylor. We'll start with item 7A, which will be resolution 22-8, a resolution of intention to annex and incorporate within the boundaries of the city of Whitefish by petition and consent of the property owner approximately 0.99 acres of land known as 580 Lund Lane in Section 1, Township 30 North, Range 22 West, in Whitefish, and zone the property to WR1, which is our one-family residential, based on the findings of fact in the staff report, subject to the recommended conditions of annexation approval, and set a public hearing for July 17th, 2023. Dave.
Good evening. So this is a new process, came about with our recent zoning text amendment where we changed our process for zonings upon our annexation zoning or zoning upon annexation. This is the first one. In the future, these will probably come on your consent agenda, the intent to annex, but I wanted just to introduce this process to you guys in kind of a new format for our staff reports. This is an intent to annex and change the zoning. It's a pretty standard type of a rezone where they're annexing in from outside the city, and the zoning that we're applying is comparable to what the existing county zoning is. But basically, you guys are just going to vote on the intent to annex, and then at the next meeting, it should be in, I think in the middle of July, the second meeting in July, then we'll have a public hearing on this, and if anybody has any issues or whatever, they can bring that up through the process as we do these in the future, and you guys will have opportunity to ask questions, and I'll go through a more thorough staff report. But this is give you kind of a feel for it. This one does have one condition on it, that they dedicate a 30-foot access easement. Currently, Lund Lane is all on the properties to the north, the 30-foot wide private easement. And so in the future, we're anticipating with our transportation plan that we would want a full 60-foot width for a potential future public street if more of those properties ever annex in, to be able to have our utilities and everything else in there. So, and the
Thanks, Dave.
applicant's aware of that, but yeah, just giving you kind of a heads up and what the process is.
Appreciate that. Any questions for Dave? Not seeing any, we will need a motion to adopt 23-8.
Mr. Mayor, I so move.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Fury. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that's unanimous. Michelle, and we'll move on to item 7B, which will now be resolution 23-9, adopting the Vision Whitefish 2024 Public Engagement Plan. Alan, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Alan Tiefenbach, Long Range Planner. Michelle, can you get my PowerPoint fired up there? All right, I'll just give you a little overview on what this is. Next slide, please. So February 16th and February 21st, there were city council work sessions. One was for the planning board, one was city council. Staff at that time presented an existing conditions report and a general timeline for the growth policy. Both of the bodies that were present at this time, they were very pleased with the information that was provided, but I did hear a significant comment from all bodies, including from the public, regarding the importance of public participation throughout this growth policy process. Following this feedback, staff researched the best strategies for public participation. Staff at this time now proposes a public engagement plan. We reviewed the public engagement plans from 10 different city, county, and state governments. We also looked at several guides on how to make a PEP. What we did, we made it to be designed to be as readable as possible and understandable for the layman, so we didn't want to use a lot of jargon. We wanted to try to make something that was pleasing and easy to read. Next page, please. I'll briefly go through what you're seeing in this. So it first of all will include an intent of what the public engagement plan is and what a growth policy is. As you know, there's been some very recent legislation that has happened. I'm not going to talk about that legislation tonight. There will be, I believe, a work session for a whole nother big piece of that, which is the Montana Land Use Planning Act. A public engagement plan is now required as part of that, but before that requirement even came forward, we were already working on this public engagement plan.
Oh.
All right. I thought that was the voices in my head, but apparently not. I have those too. We love you, Alan. It's okay. You can go on to the next page. It goes in detail about the roles of decision makers, committees, and staff. For those of us that actually have better things to do than spend our time at public hearings, many of the citizens actually probably don't always know the way the process works, who the decision-making authorities are, how the process comes together. So I wanted to very clearly explain how the process works. If you look in the plan, you'll see there's sort of a chart and explains who does what, and that's what I've listed down here. Next slide, please. I've also listed all of the different participations in the audience that would be part of this. So those would be the people that we would specifically reach out to as part of this public engagement plan. Next slide. We have gone through all the different types of opportunities for public participation. So again, the intent of this is to talk about how we are going to engage the process as we move forward with the growth policy. As you see in the plan, it sort of outlines all the different types of ways that the publics can be involved, and I've listed all these here. I'm not going to read them all off for you. Next slide, please. Again, as well as that, there's also numerous different tools of how we can do that outreach. At the end here shortly, I'm going to talk about one of the major tools that we're going to use, but you can see again a list of all the different ways that this public engagement plan talks about how we're going to reach out. Next slide. And what you see here, this was the last few pages of the public engagement plan. This goes through all the different phases of the growth policy. It talks about the tasks that would be involved during those phases, and it talks about all the different ways that the public would be engaged as we moved forward. Next slide, please. This is important. As we were working on the public engagement plan, we brought the idea to the planning board of a public engagement site. And at the time that we talked to the planning board, we were just hypothesizing whether or not they wanted us to do this. Since this time, this site has actually been built. I'll give you a screenshot here shortly. It has not launched yet. It's sitting there ready to be launched, depending on whether the council wants to approve the public engagement plan, because the site is part of that. So in general, it's a public engagement. So I'll back up for a second. The way that this works is it's an interactive site that the public or anybody else can use for all information regarding the growth policy. Information will be provided through regular updates, through newsletters, through a calendar that you can see. There'll be postings of all the documents and the video snippets that you see about the growth policy. The public would be able to directly participate. There are message boards, there's online map widgets where you can put little pins and say what your thoughts are on a particular intersection or what improvements you think need to happen somewhere. There will be the types of forum boards that you're probably used to seeing, where there's going to be quick polls and surveys. The public will be able to subscribe to this site, and they will be able to customize what kind of alerts they get. So they can choose to get any alert about anything that happens. They can only choose to be alerted about upcoming meetings. They can decide to be alerted only if there's new documents that are posted. So again, it's completely interactive. What we're hoping that this public engagement site would do is that it would make community members who maybe might not typically attend public meetings or workshops, whether it's due to reluctance or just they don't want to be here, or maybe childcare, they'll be able to participate in the growth policy just as much as anybody else would that would show up. You'll be able to look at the documents. You can comment. Your documents will be many of the different sections that you have. Your comments will be viewable to the public. So the citizens can come on. They can put in an idea of what they think is an idea. Other people can comment on those ideas as well as staff responding, and that would be viewable to the public. We do have some control to moderate exactly what goes on there for obvious reasons, but in general, it's our intent that the feedback and the ideas and the comments that are happening are going to be something that the public can see. We think it's super important that you can see the way the process kind of hashes out. This type of public engagements policy is being used in most cities today. In particular, Bozeman, Missoula, Belgrade, and Boise are all using this same type of software. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what you are seeing here, this is what we're calling the hub site. It's called Engage Whitefish, and what you see there where it says featured projects, and I'm sorry, I really wanted to be able to put the links on here tonight and scroll through the website, but I can't do that while Michelle's running the PowerPoint, so I have to give you screenshots, so I apologize about that. What you're seeing here right now is the Engage Whitefish Hub. And the way this works is the city has the license for 10 different projects. So it doesn't just have to be the growth policy. There could be parks and rec. There could be a current planning card. There could be something for transportation. But any type of projects or group of projects that the city is working on in general would go on here. And each one looks like a little card like what you're seeing there. And when you click that card, it would take you to the particular project. Now, in this particular case, because we got this software and built this software specifically for the growth policy, that's the only thing that you see here. But again, I think it's important to impress upon you that all of the different departments and all the agencies do have the ability to use this. I certainly am happy to help them do that. Okay, if you click that link, we'll take you to the screen that you're going to see here. So go ahead and move on. Okay, again, I'm sorry about, you can't really see it that well, but this is the Vision Whitefish site that as it is built today. And I can't really see it very well, and probably neither can you, but what it does up on the top is it talks about what a growth policy is and why are we doing this. And then in this particular case, if you look down about halfway, you can see different buttons. And one button is for the news feed, where all the different news types of articles that are happening with the city happen, and if you select those, it will take you to a screen just relating to that news article, and that's shareable on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, email, so people can share them around. It will give you pretty much an infinite number of documents that you can post on that news feed. On the right-hand column towards the top, all the different important links are listed. Right now there's only a couple because this is still a work in progress and we're just getting started. The little thumbnails that you see coming down, those are videos of the council so far. One of them is the work session from the planning board on the existing conditions, and the other is a video on the first public engagement plan. Keep going up again, thank you. There's also buttons if you go towards the middle and on the left. Those are tools, and again, I can't show you now because it's on a screenshot, but the different tools will include, first of all, a news feed where you see all the different news. There is a tool that's called questions, where the staff can put out a question to the citizens and say, hey, what is your idea on XYZ, and they can respond. One of the tools in those tabs is a forum tab, where people can come on and actually have an interactive type forum about whatever type of topic about the growth policy they want. One of those is a survey one, where we can put up drafts of particular sections of the growth policy and say, what do you think about this type of intersection? Or do you think that this is the best whatever? And people can use radio buttons or answering questions. There's another one there, which is the map widgets, where I talked about you'll get like a Google map and you can put little dots. So there's a whole different range of things. And then on the bottom, sort of, it's cut in half, but there's a timeline, which again, you can't really see that well, but it's the bottom right-hand corner, and then it's what you see on the other side in the right column. There's actually a timeline with little buttons, and it talks about what process you are in the growth policy, what's happening, and where we are in that process currently. And then down at the bottom, there's a little thing that says who's listening, and there's a picture of me and Dave, but I got Dave cut off, so sorry about that, Dave. As long as the council is okay with approving the public engagement plan, this website, this engagement website is basically step one, and you'll see that going online, I hope, at the end of the week. Next slide, please. That said, again, if the council is privy to be able to adopt the resolution for this, we have scheduled a kickoff meeting. We have already talked to the planning board about this. Right now, our tentative date for this would be Thursday, August 24th from 5:30 to 7 here at City Hall. And how this would be notified is outlined in the public engagement plan, but in general, for the first meeting, the kickoff meeting, we would be casting a very big net. We would be reaching out to as many people as we possibly could to get the word out. Now, we can't do that for every single phase of the growth policy because we're limited by staff, which is basically me. But we would be reaching out to as many people as we possibly could in the beginning to let them know what we're doing, how the process works. Here's the public engagement site. Register to this site, and you can be kept in the loop on everything is happening. And then there's as we're moving forward, we would notify people, but it wouldn't be this huge net that I'm casting with this, where you can see we're planning to send letters to everybody in 59937 and include it in utility bills, and we're going to send in a public service announcement to try to get it aired. So there's a whole different range of things we're going to try to do to get the word out. Last slide, please. So again, staff is still working through the details of what this kickoff meeting is going to be, but in general, what we're thinking is that there's going to be an introduction of staff and what the project is. There'll be a brief description of what a growth policy is. There'll be a description about how the process is going to work and how people can be involved. I'll do a quick overview probably of the new requirements of when I say MLUPA, that's the Montana Land Use Planning Act, which is the brand new law that just passed. I would do a similar presentation about the existing conditions of the city that I already did for you. I would do an introduction and sort of a tour of the public engagement site and what it is and how they can use it and how they can be involved. I would talk about the next coming meeting, and then we would be taking any comments and questions. And with that, Michelle, staff would recommend that the City Council adopt this public engagement plan by resolution.
Alan, thanks very much. Any questions for Alan on his engagement plan? Frank?
Alan, have we got any feedback or understanding on the other cities that have been using this particular program? I'm concerned about the curation of public comment. As we've seen on any number of platforms, people, when they're interacting on a computer, don't necessarily always follow the rules of civil engagement. So is there going to be somebody curating this to make sure that we stay within those bounds?
Boy, is that the statement of the decade, Mr. Sweeney. Yes. So first of all, I did actually reach out to both Missoula and Bozeman and talk to their public engagement coordinators, which I guess is also kind of my new title. They, in general, I mean, I hate to use the term, but they basically raved about it. Both of the people that I talked to loved it, said it made their job super easy, and they were very happy with the software. There's a few different ways to do what you're talking about. The first thing is there's already built-in moderation on the site. They have both people that monitor it and they use artificial intelligence, which are looking for particular buzzwords. So that's the first thing that they do to clear it out. Secondly, as staff, I will be reading these things. So when I see that things are posted, if those conversations go nasty, yes, we have the ability to control. We have the ability to restrict particular users. So there's basically 3 different levels of review when this stuff is public.
Thank you.
Further questions for Alan? Andy?
I just, and Maria, you chime in on this if I'm totally wrong, but under plan update phases and engagement methods, Alan, and I know they're called out, sorry Jake, and I know they're called out specifically as someone to invite and everything else, but under parks, open space, and trails, don't specifically call out for a meeting with Whitefish Legacy Partners in that, or the LLAC, and I think that might be something you'd want to include in that section right there as a specific called-for meeting, just to make sure no one feels slighted in the, I see Maria shaking her head. I think that's, because it's obviously a super important part of the trail system in the city, and because we hold all those special rec use licenses, because we hold all the conservation easements, because we provide all the insurance, I think that should be a specific called-out meeting in there.
Sure.
That's the only thing that caught my attention.
Adding this right now as you speak, if that's what the council wants to go ahead and add. I'm adding it to the draft right now.
I would extend that to Stoltz Land and Lumber Company as well.
Yeah, I agreed. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, I'll add that.
Thanks, Andy.
I was excited. I just don't want to have anybody feel slighted.
Sure, absolutely. And again, this is just kind of a brief description, but you saw I do have a list of all the partners, and when I'm getting to each section, I'll be going through this list and trying to make sure I get who's part of it, but certainly you've been here a whole lot longer than I have, so I could certainly use this comment.
There's some strong personalities out there. So.
Understood.
We do need a motion to approve Resolution 23-9 adopting the plan that Alan put together.
Mr. Mayor, I so move.
No, there's not on this item, Mary. This wasn't advertised for a public hearing. It's okay. You can leave it with us, by all means. Giuseppe?
Yes, I so moved.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion?
Yes, just a couple of comments. I've been attending the 2 sessions with the planning board in person. I know other people have been watching them on YouTube. First of all, good job to move this forward. Number 2, to me, this is just the embryo of the public engagement. And I know it is, and you need this approval to move on. At the same time, I've looked around and I looked at analytics, and sadly, websites are, I think, a thing that works better for people like you and me, not for the people that were sitting on the first row earlier during the public comment. I know the concerns about civility and respect on social media. At the same time, our city has 900 followers on Facebook, which is a good start, 600 subscribers on YouTube, and that's a good number on YouTube, only 130 followers on Instagram. I know you said that we can manage and moderate the website, and we are not going over engaging public on social media, but I would still consider evaluating those channels.
Further comments from the council? Rebecca?
Alan, you're making growth policies exciting. Good job. And I love the ability to interact, because I think our town, that's why we have such a dynamic public process, is people really show up when they really care about things. So I think it sounds great. Thank you.
Further comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. Thanks very much, Alan. That's unanimous, Michelle. You have Dana's written report enclosed with the packet. I know Dana wanted to address a few items in her manager's report before we go to questions. Dana.
Great. Thank you. First, I'm going to just remind you, July 3rd, yes, that's right, but before July 4th, which is a holiday, and we will be closed that day on July 4th, but July 3rd, we are holding a work session and council meeting, so mark it on your calendar. But I wanted to talk about today. Today is a federal holiday, and it's Juneteenth. And during the council retreat, staff was directed to reach out to our 3 unions and see if they wanted to and were willing to swap Juneteenth with Good Friday, which is a city holiday. It's not a state holiday or a federal holiday. And we did hear back from our unions, and one was neutral, and the other 2 did not support that change. I'm inclined to imagine that Good Friday is on a Friday, and so 3-day weekend versus Juneteenth that moves throughout the week is likely one of the reasons. But in Montana, we have had more communities that are establishing it as a paid holiday, Missoula most recently. And with that, I wanted to talk to council about next steps. We have 3 union contracts. We have 1, maybe 2 coming up this January where we'll start negotiating. I would recommend that we potentially wait for those negotiations to move forward before we make any final decision on how to proceed. But I think there's other options for the council to consider if they're not interested in adding a additional paid holiday for the city, which could come at a cost of, around, depends on personal time accruals for our police and fire, because that's really who it impacts. Could be upwards of like $15,000 at the max amount. And then some OT for our seasonal staff with our city beach and state park operations. But there's also options of being able to make it clear that the city recognizes the holiday. We keep offices open, and employees could swap their personal holiday with Juneteenth, because we do offer a personal holiday as in addition to the 12.5 paid holidays every year. Or you could look at just recognizing a holiday and keeping City Hall open. So I don't know that I need more direction, as long as you're okay with me working through negotiations to see if there's a way to work through that process first. But if you have a strong sentiment on moving forward one way or the other today, please let me know.
I'm comfortable just letting Dana run with this if you are. Okay. Thanks, Dana.
Thank you.
Anything further, Dana?
Nope. Oh, no. Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Any questions for Dana on her manager's report? Not seeing any. We'll move on to item 9, communications from the mayor and city councilors. You do have a letter from Michael Farrington regarding a request to purchase a city-owned lot subject to a perpetual easement. I'm not sure who can speak. Dana, thanks.
I can speak to this. We received this letter earlier this month. I will tell you that the RV that they have had a complaint about has or will be, it was supposed to be moved this weekend off of that property. The shed that was on this property was in existence when the property owners purchased the property that has a complaint filed against them. And so it's hard for us to know, if we bought the property with the easement, with the shed there or not. It's not impeding maintenance, but we are looking at maybe trying to determine if it is encroaching on city land. I think it's important to know, though, that when disposing of city property, we do need to go out to the public. It wouldn't be something where we can direct negotiate with a buyer. It would have to be open to others to be able to purchase, which may not be desired by this party. So what we're looking for is just direction from the city council. If you're interested in looking at selling this piece of property, we would obviously need the perpetual easement on it, but getting your direction so we can respond to the letter.
Could you perhaps start with a note back to Michael, just indicating that would have to be an open process, and that might just dissuade him and just drop this altogether?
Yeah. Yeah, oh,
I think that
absolutely.
would
We
be a
will, yeah,
logical
unless there was a
first
strong
step.
sentiment of the council
Yeah.
to look at selling it, which I don't recommend.
Right.
I would, that's what our intent would be.
Okay, great.
Yep, okay.
Any other thoughts from the council? Not seeing any. We'll start with councilor comments. Who would like to begin tonight? Giuseppe? No comments? Frank?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Thank you. Ben? All right. Rebecca?
2. One is slavery is still in existence all around the world, so I'm glad that we're still going to pursue in some way recognizing Juneteenth. Dana told me earlier today that Montana State does not recognize it as a holiday, but it is a federal holiday. So, and one of our citizens asked about flags being put up, and so she checked, and next year the Lions Club will be putting them up around town on Juneteenth. And then the other, I had another citizen ask about the Riverside Park trees and the when the contracts were going to be honored to make them safer. And so I talked to our arborists, and they said that after we approve the budget, they've contacted tree service that will be working on that hopefully in July, right, Maria? So if anybody's worried about that, that's going to be happening shortly. Thanks.
Thanks, Rebecca. And Andy? I had one comment or question for the council, and maybe I can ask this at the next meeting when Angie's present, but at the last meeting, she brought to our attention that the requirement for a supermajority vote for ordinances is something that this city has adopted, which I've always found to be an interesting requirement. And I'm just interested in pursuing whether or not that's in the best interest of this governing body or not, or future governing bodies for that matter. Does anyone have any strong thoughts on that? I do. You do? Okay.
I do. I think we are elected through the democratic process, and I don't see, even if I used it provocatively once, I don't see the reason for supermajority.
And I tend to agree with that. Ben?
I agree with that as well, but I would say I especially don't see a need for it in the context of development applications.
Absolutely.
Like it would matter more to me for policy ordinances. If it made sense anywhere, it'd make more sense to me for something like that.
Would the council support at least Dana asking Angie to look into this? Everyone okay with that? Yeah. It's gotten us into problems in the past where we don't have a full house, and Frank, for example, was considering having to leave early tonight, which would have put the project in a weird situation. So just trying to avoid those conflicts, I think, would be at least something worthwhile to look at. Okay. Anything further from council? How about staff? We are adjourned. Thank you.